7:01. We're on time this week. Thank you everybody for joining us. Sorry it took us a few minutes here to get the final details hooked up. We'll be better every single week. This is we've been focusing really hard on the design of the vehicle and not a lot on the marketing of the vehicle, because the most important thing is we had to design a quality vehicle that would inspire consumers to be part of the speed program. So the ones that have stepped up, we've had an excellent amount of, an awesome amount of deposits, of partners that have joined the program, and we're really excited about this car. I'm sure you guys are aware, back in 2004, 2005, I started with the RZR, and then we did the Textron XX, and now we're on to the Speed UTV. So I'll kind of walk you through the vehicle here on this slide, show you what it is. We talked about a lot of things last week. I'm going to go from this slide to answer questions. The people that have either sent emails or Instagram messages into us, we picked questions that we can answer. Every Wednesday from now on at 7 p.m. Until the coronavirus is over, we will show at 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Wednesday. And every Wednesday we'll answer questions. I'll answer 15 questions to start with. And then from there we'll get into new features of the week. Obviously a lot of these features already have to be done with our manufacturing process, but we want to share them with you and be able to give you details and walk you through them with every one of them. So I'll start with last week, and we introduced pretty much the whole car as a vehicle. As you see here, this is the four-seater. We talked about last week having 4 interchangeable shocks. The way we worked out the suspension geometry, we were able to manufacture the same shock and use it on all 4 places of the car. All right, the experienced off-road guys are going to say, okay, how'd you do that? Well, we did it by extended compressed links, and we did it by positioning our suspension properly in the geometry that we can get to optimum progression, increased rising rate suspension, but also the only differences between front and rear will be the piston shims, the piston, and the spring rates, the top spring and the bottom spring. So the cars have dual rate springs, front and rear. They've got adjustable compression and rebound externally, separately, not on the same valve like a lot of the other manufacturers out there. So you can either soften or stiffen your compression individually, or you can add or decrease rebound individually, which will allow your car to have different attitude throughout either a jump or going through the hoops or what it may be. So if you're going to go to the dunes, you probably stiffen your compression quite a bit. You might want to stiffen your rebound. You go to the desert, you're probably going to soften your compression, you're probably going to stiffen your rebound. This allows you to do that very easy based on the terrain that you're going to ride in. But our base setup will be something that'll be above the current models on all vehicles. I'm confident with where we're at that our base setup will be better than the Polaris, Can-Am, Honda, Yamaha, or anybody else that has anything out there, especially as a base model. These are position-sensitive shocks that are very progressive throughout the wheel travel. Last week we talked about front suspension. The A-arms, the left and right A-arm are the same. The upper A-arms, left and right, are the same. Oh, thinking I got a touchscreen up there. Trailing arms are universal left and right. Are they the same as what we did with the Arctic Cat? No, they're not. We made some changes to them. We've optimized a little bit. And remember, Arctic Cat never built a 77-inch wide car. They only built a 64 car. So for sure, we are way different than what the production base car is with Arctic Cat or Textron. A few things we did is we moved the sway bar for more clearance. The reason for that clearance is it gave us more engine clearance compared to where the sway bar was mounted before. It also gave us room to get an alternator belt up into this area up here in a protected area behind the seat, which should be better for mud, should be better for dust and terrain. I know all the cars bellow behind the seats a little bit. We'll do the best we can to eliminate the bellowing behind the seats with the dust. So suspension, all 4 hubs we talked about last week. I'll kind of bounce through some slides real quick. Things we talked about last week, going to suspension. All 4 hubs are interchangeable left and right. Brake discs are vented. All 4 brake discs are vented. All 4 wheel bearings. This is something very different than what we did with the Arctic Cat Textron. All 4 wheel bearings and all 4 wheel bearing housings are interchangeable on all 4 corners. So if you wanted to carry a spare wheel bearing and hub assembly, you can carry one and use it on the front or the rear of the vehicle. So we could swap this part around. There's a lot of cool features that we've done in this car to make manufacturing easy, but also make it for the dealers to have more parts available so they don't have to have a left or a right or a front or rear. We've really eliminated a lot of the components and made universal components throughout the whole vehicle. We talked about A-arms. As you see, the shock is located in the middle, the anti-roll bar is located in the middle, and the rod end misalignment at the outside, as you'll see from this side, it allows us to switch over to the other side here where we can use the lower A-arm left and right. So as I said, lower A-arms left and right universal, upper A-arms left and right universal, trailing arms left and right, switch them back and forth. They are universal. For guys that want to go racing, just think about it. That's 50% less parts you have to put in your trailer to go to the racetrack. Just in suspension components alone, we've eliminated 50% of it. Hubs, we've probably eliminated another 50% of what you need to bring as spares. Axles are the same. We've adjusted the center line of the differentials, front and rear, to be dead middle, so it runs the same axle left and right as well. So we've taken a lot of these things into consideration. Same thing with tie rods. Same left tie rod, same right tie rod. There is no tie rod or link bars in the rear to hit on rocks. There's nothing to catch back there. This is a fully independent trailing arm suspension where the tires move up and down. As you've seen in some of the Arctic Cat commercials before, this car is very different than a Polaris or Can-Am. You cannot pick this car up and make the car narrower. You cannot lower the car down and make it narrower. We stay the maximum width all the way through the travel. What that does is when the car goes in the corner and it body rolls, it still stays 77 inches wide. A Polaris and Can-Am go from 72 to probably 65, 62 at full droop, which means when you load it into the corner with where their lateral link bars are, it actually raises the back of the car up. Where we have our geometry set on double X, when you load it in the corner with side load, it actually sucks the back of the car down, which gives you a lot more confidence and a lot more, what I call it, balance or stability. So it'll hug the corner instead of trying to tip over on you. All right, so we talked about suspension, we talked about the front suspension, patented, reversible lower and upper control arms, shock mounted on the lower A-arm. Okay, why do you mount the shock on the lower A-arm? Well, the same thing. A shock, let's say, hypothetically, it weighs 35 pounds with springs. If you raise that up and mount it on the upper A-arm, that's 10 inches higher than the lower A-arm. What that's going to do is that's going to give you a higher roll center, which is going to make your car more tippy. By lowering the shock to the lower A-arm, running a J-arm like we have, we've been able to optimize the weight of the vehicle and lower the center of gravity 10 inches lower than a Polaris, Can-Am, Honda, Yamaha, or anybody else in the industry. So think about that. The shocks are now located on the lower A-arm. Also, what does it do? As you increase your travel and you look at where a full bump is, we have a most positive rising rate suspension in the industry right from the get-go. So it makes our shocks a lot easier to work, and we're not asking too much out of our valving. We talked about rear suspension, removable rear cage, same cage, unbolts. This one unbolts up here at the top, makes it very easy if you want to take your engine out of the car. For a dealer, it'll be less dealer labor time getting the motor out of the car. We've really tried to optimize everything to make it as easy as possible for the guy that has to work on the vehicle. If you have an issue, it's easy to work on. Same thing when we talk about that. I think we got 5 or 6 wrenches to work on the whole car. We've got a lot of common bolts throughout the whole car, a lot of common bolt sizes throughout the whole car, and we've also, right from the factory, have built bolts and adjusted our pivot points where we have shoulder all the way through. So we don't have bolts stopping in the middle of the spread at the weakest point and loading the bolt. So everything we've learned with IndyCar, Formula One, NASCAR, and obviously all the Baja experience, we've really put a lot of our expertise into the build of this vehicle, not only from just the look and style, from the functionality of it and the way the suspension works and the way it's designed right from the get-go. So this is going to realistically be a very, very high-end vehicle for a reasonable price. Shock absorbers, we talked about it. We're going to use a speed shock absorber on this car. My father and myself, we have been in the shock industry for years. We built our own shocks back in the early 80s, early 90s, 2000, 2010, 2020s. We've been in the shock business for a long time. I think we got a pretty good handle on what we need to do with the shocks. Hubs, we talked about hubs. When I talk about the wheel bearing, I'm talking about these two components right here. They are integrated together. And yes, the bearing is replaceable, but you only need to carry one of these complete units because you're not going to be able to press the bearing out on the trail. Obviously, you can use a swinging press like we've all done in the desert before. But if you had one unit, you could just basically replace it. Why would you need to replace it? Okay, so you go to Mud Nationals and you submarine this thing and you decide, oh, you know what, I'm just going to go ride next week. But you forget to clean your wheel bearings, you forget to do all the stuff because sometimes you're going to have seepage. When you get water in the bearings are going to rust, when you get rust in the bearings are probably going to fail. This comes down to the user of the vehicle doing things that we highly suggest not to do, but it is the off-road industry and everybody's out there thrashing and having a good time. Brakes. Brakes is something new. We'll kind of show you a little bit of our brake package. We talked about it last week. Here in the next couple weeks, we'll walk you through the whole braking system of the vehicle. But today, this is a view of what the hub looks like. We've got a lockable nut ring here to keep the hubs from falling off. We've also got brakes, the speed brakes. We've optimized the brake package now. We've been able to give a little more structure, a little more reinforcement into the brake. So this will be something very different than what people have seen in the UTV industry before. This would be like getting one of the high quality brake calipers on your car. This is kind of an aftermarket accessory, but we're going to include this in as part of the Speed UTV base vehicle component. Because I think if you're going to go fast, you've got to have brakes. You've got to have both sides of the equation. All right, here's what I'm going to do for the next few minutes. Do we have any good questions that have come through here, Ginger?
No, we're not.
No, nobody has any questions? They're just following through?
Some questions.
There's a couple.
All right, is there any good ones from today?
Are the bearings sealed?
Yes, the bearings are sealed. They are sealed bearings. Like I said, the chances of those things getting full of water is slim, but if it does happen, it'd be very easy to replace and move on.
What's the angle of the shocks at full droop?
Angle of the shocks at full droop. I got to be honest, I don't really worry about what the angle is of shock at full droop. I worry about what the angle of shock is at full compression.
Will they take trade-ins?
I've always joked and said that I would be the #1 Polaris and Can-Am, used Polaris and Can-Am dealer. I got to be honest with you guys, I really don't have an interest in that. I would go out to your local dealer, like a very experienced dealer, like Coin Power Sports, who signed up to be one of our dealers here with Speed UTV, and ask them what they would give you for a trade-in on a Polaris or Can-Am, or even a Textron Arctic Cat.
Are we getting 930 CVs?
Are we getting 930 CVs? No. You're not getting 930 CVs. You're actually getting something better. The CVs that we developed on the Speed UTV platform is what's going to be in this car. So this is a double plunge. They have 300 M stars. These are the components that we've used at Dakar last year. These components that we use at the MEP 400. These are very high quality CV components. Something I would use in my race car, not just in a production car.
A couple guys asked 64-inch.
64-inch car. Yeah, let's talk about 64-inch car. And I know there's a market for 64, but when we first started with the Arctic Cat and they launched the 64 car base car was really what the Arctic Cat let's say market share was with their dealers, the trails they were based around. The western region where I'm from, we can run 72 and 77 inches cars. 77 was the rule last year for Best on Desert and Score for maximum widths, and it's also my trophy truck number. So that was a real easy number to say, okay, if we're gonna be better than Polaris and we're gonna be better than Can-Am, let's build the biggest car out there. And we built a 77-inch wide, 120-inch wheelbase 4-seater with 32-inch tall tires as our base tire from the factory. And all LE cars will come with 32-inch tall tires.
Hvac wheels.
Beadlock wheels. That's been a question, and that's all my question. Let me go into questions from last conference and try to go through these the best we can, and then I'll bring you through the most current presentation. The first one is beadlock wheels. That was an easy one to go into. Brian Border. Brian, thank you for your question. Presentation, I was told they weren't coming with them, but Robbie said in his presentation they were. That has been something that we have changed since the Sand Sport Show, and that is one of our limited edition items that come with the first 500 vehicles. Now remember, we're going to do a limited edition car now, which will be our base cars, and then we'll do base models, or we'll do limited edition cars now, and then after these first 500 four-seaters, we'll do base model cars, but you'll always be able to get the upgradable items like the carbon fiber seats, like the 5-point harnesses, like the roof. But for the first 500 four-seaters that sign up with us, and we're well over the 400 number that we've sold as far as four-seaters go, we will offer beadlock wheels, 32-inch tall tires, 5-point harnesses, a roof, all as LE pricing at our current $32,000 price. So those are the extras. Last week I said $2,500. I was way off on my number, guys. That's closer to $5,000 if you add those components up alone. What's the projected release date? This is from D. Agar. Anger, sorry. An angry guy. What's the projected, oh, come on, work for me. What's the projected release date? Also, will there be HVAC models? Last week we talked about it when we were designing the car. We designed the original body to be able to have air conditioning, sealed cabin roof. So when we were going off to make our molds, I wanted to make sure the car had style and design. The open cockpit car, the four-seater was similar to what was shown at the Sand Sports last year, will be produced without a windshield, without windows, and it's not a closed cab car. What is our projection date for having a closed cab car? Our projection date is summer of 21 to have a closed cab sealed UTV for the dealer market base. Sean Murphy. Is the engine being fed by a single throttle body or dual? I'll get into that today during our engine release and talk more about the engine details. It is a single throttle body with dual injectors per cylinder. Single throttle body, dual injectors per cylinder. We'll talk about that at the end of this presentation. We talk about the engine. Thank you for your question. Brian Border asks, just a few weeks ago, it was said the motor was a Z1 snowmobile engine. What changed all of a sudden? The engine was never a Z1 snowmobile engine. Obviously, a Z1 snowmobile engine is 1,100 cc's. In the UTV industry, we've got to be 1,000 cc's, so this is a 999 cc. Obviously, what changed? It really changed from the beginning, to be honest with you. You know, if you look at my relationship back in the beginning with Polaris and then with Articat, Textron, which we ran the Yamaha motor at Textron, one thing I wanted to make sure of when we built the Speed UTV, that we were never handicapped by a potential engine supplier. Not only an engine supplier, we wanted to not be handicapped by a gearbox supplier, a suspension supplier, a shock supplier. We wanted to be able to control our own destiny here. And what I mean by that is, if we were to go out and purchase an excellent engine, let's just say the Yamaha like we have in the Double X, excellent engine, but they don't want to give us a 300 horsepower engine, what do? We're stuck. Can-Am comes along, they make 300 horsepower, and we're stuck behind again. One thing I wanted to do is be able to control our own destiny here in the future. So we went off and did all the way, jumped all the way off the deep end into the engine platform. Yes, engines is something we've done in our past throughout other forms of motorsports. Not too worried about this because we've associated with some very good engineering staffs out there, some very strong companies, and I feel confident about what we're doing with the engine. So it's a 999 2-cylinder, 2 injectors per cylinder, single throttle body engine that comes in the Speed UTV. And we'll talk about motor towards the end of this presentation. Nate Parsons. Pearson, sorry. On almost all current side-by-sides out there, belt life is a concern. Is there anything new with the design that will help with longevity and reliability? All right, so let's talk about belt life, and this will be another conversation we have when we talk about engines and gearbox, but I don't want to go and not answer your question. So, we are currently working directly with a top belt manufacturer to ensure our belts have cutting-edge performance and reliability. We will also have an infrared belt temp sensor, and we can control the fly-by-wire throttle to manage the belt life. Hopefully you guys understand what that means, but we've got fly-by-wire throttle on this engine. We've got an infrared belt temp sensor. If we see that the belt temp, if the engine ECU sees that the belt temp is exceeding optimum operating temperature, which we've already put some precautions in with fans and cooling and mechanically controlled fans to control the temperature. It'll also tune down the throttle to keep you at a manageable belt life. Something different than I believe anything has in the industry today, but this is your safety switch. Now this would also be like on your current Corvette where you have traction control. If you want to choose to drive it, ride at your own unlimited limitations, click the button, shut off the manager control system on the belt, and you can race this thing and you can manage your own belt temperature as much as you want. Oh, Nate's got another one. Todd Romano's, Nate asked Todd, is there a 3-speed transmission or just high-low range? Nate, the transmission will be discussed in another presentation coming in the next few weeks. I promise you we got some very exciting components coming in the Speed UTV vehicles. This won't be the gearbox just for the 4-seater. It'll be the same gearbox for the truck. It'll be the same gearbox for the 2-seater. And this will be our standard gearbox to start with, and we'll talk about in the next few weeks. But thank you for your question, and I promise to address it here in the coming weeks. Ryan Katz. If the UTT is going to be 10 inches shorter, where is the 10 inches to be lost at? It's going to be easier to slide into this area right here. So one thing we did with the car, and one thing we learned when we did the Textron XX, is how can we make as many components universal so that we can use these on multiple vehicles. So the fuel tank is here, which is the largest fuel tank in the UTV industry today. It'll be 15 plus gallons. The fuel tank will always stay in this position. So the difference in wheelbase is going to become about where the seat post is. In this range here where the seat post is, we'll adjust our wheelbase based on the 120-inch 4-seater, the 110-inch UTT, and the 96-inch wheelbase 2-seat UTV high sport model, more of a short course woods trail car. Is that Joden Werlin? Joden Werlin, you stated the 4-seat dimensions last week, but can you expand for us playing which trailer to purchase? Request not only wheelbase overall length 2-seat, 4-seat models, as well as confirm 77 is where the wheel tire bulge is. That is correct. Wheel tire bulge on this vehicle is 77 inches. All right, so let me answer your question. I got a slide right over here that will help us explain how we're doing it and how we're going to make these cars flow together. If you look here in the darker gray area, So the front side of the vehicle will always stay. Doesn't matter if it's a 2-seat, a UTT, or a 4-seat. So from the driver's door forward, the cab always stays. Try to get into a... All right. From this section right here, this section right here, and this section right here, this will change in the UTT. So the section I'm talking about here, and I'll do a better color slide next week for you, of what changes on the UTT. Then when we go to the 2-seater, nothing changes except for the door comes out. So when the door comes out, the front of the car slides back, the old back seats become the front seats, and whammo, you've got a 2-seat and 4-seat that share a lot of the same components. Now for a dealer network, think about it. All these components are always the same. All these components are always the same. All you got to do is stock that stuff. If you have that stuff in stock, you've got parts for 3 vehicles on 3 completely different chassis platforms. But all suspension, all the drivetrain, a lot of that stuff is the same. Let me go back to my...
We'll just read out the wheelbases.
Yeah, wheelbases. I can go to wheelbases real quick for you.
Go back.
There we go. UTT wheelbase, 95-inch 2-seat, 110-inch UTT 4-seat, 120-inch wheelbase. This is, I don't know what the Honda is, to be honest with you. I'm not really too concerned what the Honda is, but this is shorter than the current 4-seat Polaris. I think the new 4-seat Polaris is 125-inch wheelbase. So we're 5 inches shorter than the current Polaris, and I believe we're 15 or 16 inches shorter than the current Can-Am. I'll check my math again. I'll get better next week, and I'll post what the Can-Am is and what the Polaris is. So we're shorter wheelbase. This will make a much better dune car, much more nimble, less apt to get high-centered on the top of the dunes. Should we go into a few more questions from last week?
Got a couple from right now.
Okay.
I've got a guy that's 6 feet 6 inches tall. He has problems fitting into a UTV. What can giant people do to enjoy the sport instead of just spectating?
All right, excellent. What's his name?
Dougie Nichols.
Dougie Nichols.
I hope I'm saying the last name correctly.
Dougie Nichols? Something like that? Maybe Dougie Nichols. This is a question from right now. He says he's 6'6". He would love to join in on the UTV game. Unfortunately, he feels like he's way uncomfortable and can't fit into a current UTV the way it's done. What I would suggest for you, Dougie, the optimum car for you is going to be the UTT. Now, if you think about that, and I'll slide over to where this slideshow is here. It's probably best to do it right here. Actually, not. I've got a better slide over here for you. All right. So think about this. This is the current 4-seater. On the current 4-seater, when we go to the UTT, there's an extra 10 inches behind the driver's seat. So you can move back 10 inches farther. We can actually take a look at this, and if you suggest when you're ordering cars from us that you're a big guy, we can work on getting you an extra set of seat mounts mounted into the chassis from the factory. This is probably a good idea to do anyways. We'll probably put 2 sets of seat mounts on the driver's side for the big guys so they can always jump in here and drive. You know, I want basketball players to drive this thing, but then again, I want jockeys to be able to drive it too. So I want to be able to build a car that works for everybody. And we've tried to do that throughout our full design and the whole process of this vehicle. Good question. Thank you.
Is the suspension strapped or limited by the shocks?
Is the suspension strapped or limited by the shocks? I think I know what you mean by that, but I'm going to say that pretty much every vehicle out there in the UTV category today is limited by the shocks. But we're really not limited by the shocks. We're limited by the CV angle, and the CV travel is CVs. So the thing that limits us on more wheel travel, less wheel travel is the CV angle and how much travel we can get out of CVs. Now, if we went to a 5-link system or 4-link system like everybody else, we could get a lot more wheel travel, okay? But it's not the amount of wheel travel, it's the quality of wheel travel. You know, you've heard this time and time again, and you've watched it in all forms of motorsports. The guy that dials his shocks in the best is the guy that's going to have an advantage. From our standpoint, you know, I've been doing this a long time. feel pretty confident with our shock technology and think that we'll be just fine.
He's asking if there's limit straps.
It's a limit strap. Thank you, Casey. Casey said, does it have limit straps? No, it does not have limit straps. And no, it does not have hydraulic, or it does not have bump rubbers in the shocks. And no, it doesn't have a spring inside the shock. This has some of our patented technology. Basically, imagine a hydraulic bump stop on the inside of the shock going the other direction. This is something I've been using for a long time on my trophy truck shocks. I've never had limit straps on the front of the truck for the last 26 years. We haven't had a limit strap, actually along 28 years, we haven't had a limit strap on the front of our cars. We've had this hydraulic droop strap. We continue to put that right into this model car and into these shocks that we're building here. So this will have our latest technology of shocking included in these shocks.
35-inch tires, how much adjustment? Any body trimming?
Body trimming. Okay, so question was 35-inch tall tires, any body trimming? In the rear of the car, there will be no body trimming. So in the rear, plan on the 35-inch tall tire clearing the body. In the front, we will be doing a little bit of tire clearance trimming right here. We'll have to clean about an inch off of this throughout this. We'll give you a template to cut for a 35-inch tall tire. You're going to ask, why do I got to cut the fender? Why can't you just raise the fender another 1.5 inches? Every 1.5 inches that we raise the fenders out here in front of us is less view that you're going to be able to see. So you'll have a wheel well, and I call this the wheel well trim. We have it front and rear. We have optimized this, right? This little side profile. We've optimized this for 35-inch tall tires. Unfortunately, if I raise this section up right here, you're going to lose visibility looking left and right on the trail. So I've tried to keep this to the best possible position for driver view. But we will have to trim this right here just a little bit. We'll give you a nice template. There will be room for the inner fender well. You won't have to adjust your inner fender well. It will already be adjusted for a 35-inch tall tire. I think it's time to move into the presentation for this week. Thank you for your questions. Next week, every week, I'll take 15 to 20 minutes to answer the questions that come up throughout the week. And we'll try to get to as many as we possibly can. I know Todd Romano's been doing a good job on the social side, as well as Rob and Scott out there. Like I said, we'll try to answer the questions the best of our ability, give you honest answers. We've talked about this. We've shared the wheelbases. This is something a lot of people ask. Well, if you're 100 or you're 95 inches, your 95-inch car, how do I know if the car is going to fit in my trailer? Well, from the first point, if we've got a 32-inch tall tire, you've got to add 16 inches from the wheelbase to the front. When we go to the rear, what did we go? We went 25 inches. So 25 inches from the very back of the bodywork to the center of the tire. So you got to add the 25 and the 16, which gets you 41 inches longer than what the wheelbase is. This is what the speed UTV is going to be. Okay? Can we make it go straight up in the back? Yeah, you could. But you're going to lose some bed. I'll leave that. If you want to make your car look ugly, go ahead and take a Sawzall to it and cut it off. Let's talk about the bed. Let's talk about engine. This is really where we ended up last week. We ended up at the engine here. This is what we said we would talk about this week. This is a 2-cylinder 999 cc. All right. One thing I talked about this week, and a lot of people were confused, and we plugged the gearbox on it because we really didn't want to show you all of our gearbox stuff. But I did plug a gearbox on here for you. This is the front of the car facing to my right. So this direction is the front of the car. Cool air from the front of the car comes in, goes through the intake, alternators up towards the front. Gearbox, turbo will be back here in the back. I think there's some more pictures as we move forward. There we go. There's a better picture of the current UTV. As I said, this is turbocharged, 2 injector per cylinder, 4 valve, dual override cam. There's a little bit more details of the motor. I wanted to give you guys a real inside look. I'm not aware of many manufacturers completely showing you all their cards before releasing the vehicle, but I felt, you know, I've had over 400 plus investors into our company, and I consider everybody that bought a car an investor because you're part of us. Without you guys, we wouldn't be in the position we're in today to be able to manufacture a high performance UTV. So bore is 98 millimeters, stroke 66. I'll zoom into those numbers for you. If you guys want to screenshot it, you're more than welcome to. Bore 98 millimeter, stroke 66.2 millimeters, number of cylinders 2-cylinder, 4 valve per cylinder. And someone asked last week, and I knew I'd get into it, 4 valves per cylinder and forged pistons. I see someone's questioning us over there. What's the question?
We're just looking at a post.
Someone posted something good for us?
We have a question, what connecting rods?
What connecting rods? We'll get into that as we go. So there's a detailed look of the engine. A bit more of a detailed look of the engine. Engine obviously facing forward. Stock production horsepower. This is engine horsepower. I want to make sure that we stress this. This isn't if you put it on a chassis dyno, it's not going to make 230 horsepower. This makes 230 horsepower on an engine dyno with 20 pounds of boost at 91 octane fuel. Speed key, we've talked about it time and time again. This will be a 300 horsepower, 30 pounds of boost, and we're suggesting E85 fuel. Notes, all tunes will be carbon EPA compliant. Speed key requires liability release waiver, termination of motor and powertrain warranty.
Same engines in all 3 vehicles?
Same engines in all 3 vehicles. All 3 of our first vehicles that we're going to build are going to be turbocharged engines. You know, when we looked at building the Speed brand with a name Speed, how do you show up with the least amount of horsepower? We couldn't do that. How do we show up with the narrowest car? We couldn't do that. We tried that once before, so this time here we're going to do it like Lambo and Ferrari, and we're going to bring our best game to the table right from the get-go. Ports. Let's talk about motor real quick. Ports designed by IndyCar, NASCAR, racing motor designer engineer. They will have 12 millimeter spark plugs, and they will have dedicated cooling circuits for ports and spark plug. I want to thank you guys for joining today. I'll answer a couple more questions that are popping through. I see we got some doubters over there. I see some people smiling and laughing. So go ahead and give me a couple doubters.
No, it wasn't doubt. We just have another question about what's being done to increase belt reliability. We talked about it.
Yeah, I think I addressed that. The question was, and who was it that asked the question?
Jim Howell.
Jim Howell asked about what are we doing to increase belt life and reliability. We talked about this will have an infrared system on it. It'll have a controlled throttle body system. We'll be able to manage the belt life and temperature. If you choose to turn that off and run 90 miles an hour down the highway for 30 miles, you've assumed that. But what we're going to do is we're going to do the best job we can to deliver you a very reliable vehicle right from the get-go. This is not a race car. This is a car that could be raced, but this is a very fun UTV. A lot of people say, why didn't you put a gearbox in it? Remember, I still want this car to be a car that anybody from 16 to 70, 80, 90 can drive this car. CVT is a very fun car to drive, very easy to drive, and a very easy car for a lot of people to go fast in and have a lot of fun.
Christopher Blair said, you mentioned before that the use of the speed key would void the warranty. If you purchase the key and do not use it until the warranty is expired, is there a way for dealers to know so that your warranty is valid?
The question is the speed key. Can you purchase a speed key? You can purchase a speed key at any time you choose to purchase the speed key. But when you plug the speed key into the car, we're going to know when you plug it in. And the question is, does it void warranty? It's not just warranty, it's assumption of risk. We're giving you basically a Ferrari and a Lambo, and we're cutting you loose with it. We're asking you guys to be smart with it. And that's part of that release, is you're assuming that release there, and you're assuming responsibility at that point.
Forged crank and rods.
Yes, sir. Question was forged crank and rods. That question is yes. Turbocharged engine, high performance turbocharged engine. I don't think we can do it any other way without a forged piston or rods. Again, thank you. Thanks for joining us this week on Speed UTV live chat. I will answer more questions next week. Hopefully, we'll get better every week at doing this. And next week, we will talk about drivetrains. So stay tuned for our social media updates on Speed UTV, Robbie Gordon Instagram, Robbie Gordon or Speed UTV Facebook, Speed Side by Side, and all of our excellent marketing partners out there like UTV Underground, UTV Action Magazine, even the guys over at UTV Fails. You know, why do I mention UTV Fails? Look at how many UTVs fail in UTV Fails. I look at UTV Fails to make sure that I don't do the same thing with my car when we're designing them.
Remind them where to go to pre-order.
Yep, and remember, if you are interested in one of the Speed UTVs, the first 500 vehicles of the 4-seat, there's about 100 left 4-seaters. There's more UTTs and there's more 2-seaters available. But go to speedutv.com for more information. You can go to Speed UTV for pre-order, and we will also be starting to announce our dealer network in the coming days. But Coin Power Sports was our first dealer. Thank you, Travis and Marty, for signing up with us. If you're interested in the Speed UTV, you can actually go over to Travis Coins or Marty Coins at one of those Coin Power Sport places and get signed up. But thank you, and we'll talk to you next week.